The email showed up on a Tuesday mid-morning. It came without fanfare, no urgent subject line, no red flag, just a quiet line in my inbox. Final transfer, Pine & Co. It was from Smith & Partners, the legal firm my father had worked with since the early days. I wasn't listed as the recipient, but someone had copied me in. Maybe by mistake, maybe not. Out of habit, I opened it. I didn't expect anything, certainly not what I found in paragraph 3. Effective immediately, full operational control equity transfer and brand title of Pinewood Co. will be reassigned to Ms. Sophia Ellison. I read it twice, then once more, just to be sure I hadn't misunderstood. My name wasn't mentioned anywhere. Not in the transfer, not in the acknowledgments, not even in the CC line. I wasn't overlooked. I was removed. I sat there for a long time, not in shock exactly. More like the moment after a sharp fall when your body hasn't started hurting yet, but you know it will. It didn't make sense. Or maybe it made too much sense. For the past 7 years, I'd lived and breathed that company. What started as a dusty dry goods store at the edge of Oregon had become a $90 million lifestyle brand. I built the product lines, hired the teams, sourced the packaging, created the supplier pipeline from scratch. The shift to certified organic, that was me, the rebrand me. The new revenue model that kept us alive through COVID, also me. I still remember pitching the expansion strategy in our first investor meeting while my father sat 2 seats away saying nothing. Now it belonged to Sophia, my younger sister, the one who'd once said, "I don't get why you work so hard for soap." She came back 2 years ago from spiritual travel, took a few photos in front of the store, and somehow became head of community. At first, I laughed. Then I stopped laughing when Dad started bringing her to calls when she started speaking for the brand. "She's fresh," he told me once, the kind of energy investors notice. I gave him the numbers. He gave me a smile. That email, that quiet little email, was the confirmation I didn't ask for. I didn't reply. I didn't forward it. I just closed my laptop and stared at the wall behind it. One question wouldn't leave me. When exactly did they decide I no longer existed, and the one that hurt more? Why did they think I wouldn't fight back? I didn't reply to the email. I didn't forward it. I didn't even mention it to anyone. Instead, I opened a folder I hadn't touched in years. The original archive I built when we were still calling it the shop, not a brand. Inside were early brand assets, PDFs, mock-ups, supplier contracts, handwritten timelines, copy drafts I'd written on flights and edited between shifts. It wasn't nostalgia. It was record-keeping. I'd always been the one who kept the paper trail. The first logo file was still there. I remembered drawing it on the back of a napkin at a coffee shop near the co-op after a buyer said our packaging felt too forgettable. I stayed up that night teaching myself Illustrator, trying to make something that looked like memory-soft typeface curling ampersand, like a root, simple grounded mine. Dad had said it looked a little handmade, but I convinced him to test it. It tripled our wholesale orders in under 3 months. I pulled up the current website. The ampersand was gone. So was everything else I recognized. New logo, new name, new tone. Under our journey, the story began recently. Not a single photo from before. Not a mention of our first storefront or the 5 years we spent loading boxes ourselves. Just Pine Studio was founded by Sophia Ellison as a space for intentional beauty and mindful design. I searched for my name. It wasn't there. I checked the blog Archive Media mentions the press section. Nothing. The interview I did with our first national stockist, gone. The local article where I explained our early product sourcing process, not linked. Even my quote about small rituals, the one that used to be printed on the inside flap of every box, replaced by a line from Sophia. "I want every product to feel like light in your hands." I opened Sophia's LinkedIn. She had updated her title, founder and CEO, Pine Studio, public speaker, brand visionary. In one video clip, she held up the bar soap I spent 3 winters perfecting, the one we used to call Snow Day. She smiled and said, "This one's my favorite. I made it for my mom." I watched in silence as she described the scent like it came from her childhood, not mine. They hadn't just taken the business. They'd rewritten its origin story. And I wasn't just cut out. I was smoothed over. They'd lifted the language, the ideas, the textures, but not the fingerprints. Not the parts that pointed back to me. I checked the brand's latest investor deck. In the milestone slide, the timeline started recently. It listed first major retail partnership, which I had negotiated earlier. Sustainable pivot, which I had pitched during lockdown. The only thing new was the name. I thought back to something Dad once told me during a late-night strategy meeting. No one remembers who poured the concrete. They just see the windows. At the time, I thought he meant we were a team, that he was reminding me not to chase attention. Now I realized he'd been telling me the plan. He never intended to build the story around me, just on top of me. I didn't call my father. I didn't reply to Sophia's text. I didn't write a long email or request a meeting. I didn't ask why they erased me. I already knew. They didn't think I'd push back. They thought I'd do what I always did. Let it go, work harder, carry the weight quietly. But this time, I didn't carry anything for them. I started walking backward, not in regret, but in precision. Brick by brick, memory by memory. The first thing I did was check the lease on the original Pinewood Coates storefront, the one on High Street with the peeling brick facade and the warped wooden floors I used to mop myself. It had changed hands when we expanded, rolled into a management shell company that Dad and I set up years ago. I still remembered the LLC name. It took 5 minutes to look it up, 10 minutes to realize the lease was expiring in 30 days. I drove out the next morning. The street hadn't changed much. Same hand-painted signs, same faded cafe on the corner, same couple arguing outside the laundromat. The shop windows were empty now. The new flagship was across town, but I could still see the tape marks where I used to hang promo flyers. I parked and went straight to the leasing office. Sarah still worked there. She'd been the one to approve our first lease when I was 23 and too nervous to make eye contact. She blinked when she saw me. "Hannah Ellison," she said, half smiling. Now, there's a name I haven't heard in a while. I told her I was interested in the space again. She raised an eyebrow. "I thought your sister was running things now." "She is?" I said. Sarah waited a moment, then she leaned forward, lowered her voice. "Well, that space is about to be available again. Payment lapsed. I don't think they're keeping it." I signed the paperwork that same afternoon. I walked through the empty store. The lighting was poor. The floor still creaked near the back storage room. There were marks on the counter from when I spilled candle dye during our second product test. They never came out. I ran my hand across the wall where I used to write delivery notes in pencil light enough to erase, but dark enough to see if the sunlight hit just right. Next, I contacted our first lavender supplier, a family farm 2 counties north. I still had the daughter's number saved in an old folder. I called her. She remembered me. "Your sister's people stopped ordering from us last year. She said they were going global." I asked if they'd work with me again. She said yes. After that, I tracked down Robert, the printer who ran our first ever batch of labels. I still remembered the layout error in batch 1. The scent name had bled too close to the edge. I drove to his warehouse. He hadn't changed a bit. "You want the old files?" he asked. "Nobody ever came back for those." I took them. By Friday, I had the lease, the supplier, the packaging, the original design files in the same barcode range we started with, all under my name. I didn't post about it, didn't announce a comeback. This wasn't a comeback. I wasn't building something new. I was rebuilding what never should have been abandoned. Not because I wanted the world to see it, but because I needed it to exist somewhere that wasn't buried under polish and press photos. They had the name, they had the followers, they had the packaging, but I had the scaffolding, the people, the smell of cedar oil that stuck to my coat in winter. That was enough. The first call came 3 days after I signed the lease. Dad's name lit up on my phone like it had so many times before, during the build-out, during supplier delays, during late night, margin checks when we still did everything ourselves. I didn't answer. He called again the next day, left a voicemail this time. "Hey, Hannah, just wondering how you're doing. Haven't heard from you. Give me a call." I didn't. Instead, I drove to the shop and stood behind the old register. I ran a dry cloth across the wood, even though there was no dust yet. I rewired the back lights, replaced a broken drawer pull that had been loose since year 2. Things no one else would notice, but I did because I'd put them there. 2 more calls came that week. One from my mother. She never called. Her message was short. Whatever this is, you're making things harder than they need to be. I let that sit. I didn't answer texts either. Sophia sent the first one. What are you doing at the High Street space? No greeting, no sign of confusion, just a direct shot. It wasn't curiosity. It was fear. I didn't answer. Then came the letter. A clean PDF from their legal team addressed formally to my business address. It was a courtesy inquiry asking for clarification on whether my new activity constituted an attempt to commercially compete using overlapping brand assets. I printed it out and left it on the table while I drank my coffee. I read it again slowly, this time aloud to see how it sounded. Then I replied, 1 page, simple. The physical property at 118 High Street, as well as product formulations, visual design templates, and original copy language, were developed and filed under my name during the early years. Any overlap results from your continued use of materials that predate current leadership. Please direct future communication to counsel. I mailed it. Certified tracked. After that, the calls stopped for a few days. Then Sophia showed up in person. I was restocking tea tins on the back wall when I heard the door open. She walked in like she'd been sent. Clean lines, polished voice. "Hannah," she said, "we need to talk." I stood, wiped my hands. "You're here now?" I asked. After 2 years of talking for me, she didn't answer that. She looked around at the store. "You're rebuilding it. I'm remembering it," I said. She exhaled, frustrated, or maybe just unsure. "Dad says you're trying to take it all down." I looked at her. Really looked. She wasn't afraid of me. She was afraid I'd make people remember the version of the story where she wasn't there. "I'm not trying to take it down," I said. "I'm just taking back the parts you didn't know were real." She didn't respond. She left without touching anything, and I went back to shelving tins 1 row at a time. They didn't take me seriously. Not really. Even after I reopened the old store, even after I stocked the shelves with familiar shapes and scents, even after I stood behind the same counter they had once called Too Small Town for a national brand. They thought I was making noise, symbolic protest, a message from the bitter sister who didn't move on. Maybe they expected me to lash out, demand a seat back at the table. But I wasn't interested in their table. I had already built the floor they put it on. I just needed them to remember that. The second legal letter came by mail, signed by an attorney I didn't recognize. It wasn't friendly. It accused me of infringing on intellectual property product names, scent formulas, packaging layouts. They said my new store caused confusion with their current brand identity. It was dressed up in legal terms, but the message was simple. You're trespassing on what we built. What they didn't realize was that I never left. I didn't panic. I didn't even get angry. I walked to the back office, opened the file drawer marked Legal, Early Years, and pulled out the documents they forgot existed. There it was a notarized agreement signed by my father and me, listing every original formulation, every visual layout, every written phrase used in our first 3 years. Ownership mine. It wasn't just a creative folder, it was the foundation. And they never transferred it. Back then, Dad told me we didn't need to hire a lawyer, said it was better if I held the original documents until we figure out how big this gets. We never followed up, and they never asked for the transfer. So, I filed everything under my name, quietly, permanently. I put together a reply, 1 packet, neat, thorough, annotated. I listed what I owned. The lavender and citrus blend we called Rainlight, the original Ritual Care tagline they still printed on boxes, the layout templates I created in PowerPoint when we couldn't afford a designer. I cited registration numbers, included timelines. Then I added 1 sentence centered and bold. You have 14 calendar days to discontinue use of the attached intellectual property. Failure to comply will constitute willful infringement under federal law. I sent it by courier. Certified. No email, no heads up. 4 days passed. Then 7. On the 9th day, a junior lawyer from their side called and asked if I'd consider a licensing agreement. Legacy partnership, he called it. Said they wanted to honor the roots. I said no, politely. No explanation. Just no. Day 12. Sophia posted a video. She stood in a neutral-toned studio with soft music playing behind her. "We are entering a new chapter," she said, "a reimagined brand that reflects who we are now, not where we began." The caption was full of buzzwords, growth-forward vision, but what I saw was something else: withdrawal. Over the next month, their packaging changed. The copy softened. The names disappeared. The labels got cleaner but emptier. One by one, the things I made stopped showing up in their feed. No one announced it. There were no headlines. But I knew what it meant. I didn't sue. I didn't go public. I didn't send a final message or leak a single file. I just watched as they erased what they once took quietly and completely, because they no longer had the right to hold it. I never wanted to destroy what they built. I only wanted them to stop building it on top of me. The rebrand happened quietly. No public apology, no announcement of rights transferred or names removed, just new packaging, new language, a reshuffled website. Pine Studio became Studio Pine. The shelves looked cleaner. The copy sounded vaguer. The core faded. They moved on, and I let them. I didn't respond to the lawyer's final offer. I didn't check the trademark filings to see how much they had changed. I didn't walk past the flagship store again. I didn't need to. What mattered wasn't whether people knew what I did. It was that they couldn't pretend I hadn't done it. About a month later, a package arrived at the store. No return address. Inside was the black moleskin notebook I thought I lost in year 3. The one I filled with scent ratios, price projections, small sketches in the margins. On the inside cover in my handwriting was a line I wrote during a snowstorm when we couldn't afford a generator and worked by candlelight. If we ever forget how this started, we lose the right to say what it is. There was no note, but the postmark said, Seattle. I put the notebook in the drawer under the register. Not to keep it safe, just to keep it near. That spring, the shop filled slowly. A few locals remembered it. A college student wandered in looking for something for her mother. An older man recognized the smell and said, "Didn't this place used to carry that cedar soap?" I nodded. "We still do." He smiled, picked up a bar, held it to his nose. "Smells like the old days." I didn't explain. Didn't need to. I restocked the shelves, cleaned the back room, replanted the herb box near the window. I ordered another round of labels. Same design. No logo this time, no tagline. One morning, as I was opening up, a woman stood outside the door. She hesitated before coming in. She looked around slowly, touched the wooden counter, scanned the shelves like she was looking for something she couldn't name. After a while, she asked, "Is this new?" I smiled. "Not really." She nodded, bought a candle, didn't ask for a bag. As she left, she paused and said, "It feels like something that remembers, and maybe that's all I ever wanted. Not credit, not revenge, not even recognition. Just a place where the version of the story I lived, the one I built, was still alive, untouched by edits. Something that remembered." Looking back, I've learned that true ownership isn't in titles or spotlights, but in the quiet foundations we lay. Family bonds can blur business lines, teaching me to document every step, guard my creations, and never assume loyalty overrides ambition. Erasing my role showed me resilience isn't about revenge, but reclaiming my narrative with precision and grace. Now, I build not for validation, but for authenticity, knowing that what I create endures beyond any rewrite. The real power lies in remembering your roots while others chase the facade.
The warehouse was freezing in winter and suffocating in summer, and I'd spent the last 5 years pretending that was my entire world. I started working at Chin Logistics when I was 23, fresh out of college with a business degree nobody in my family took seriously. Not because they didn't value education, they did, obsessively, but because I'd gone to state school instead of the private universities my siblings attended. Community college with delusions of grandeur. My older brother Kevin called it at my graduation party. He'd gone to Northwestern. My sister Jennifer went to Boston College. Both had graduated with honors, internships at prestigious firms and job offers waiting. I'd graduated with $60,000 in student loans, 3 part-time jobs on my resume, and a 3.9 GPA that nobody mentioned because it wasn't from the right school. When I asked Dad about working at the family company, he'd been uncomfortable. "We don't really have positions for entry-level people right now. Maybe in a few years when you've got some real experience." Kevin was made regional sales manager the day after his graduation. He had zero experience. Jennifer became marketing director 6 months after her graduation. Also zero experience. But they were the golden children. The ones who'd gone to the right schools, knew the right people, fit the family image. I was the afterthought. The youngest child who disappointed everyone by being average in a family of supposed excellence. You could work in the warehouse, Mom suggested finally, like she was offering me charity. We need reliable people for inventory and shipping. It's honest work. Not everyone is cut out for management. I took the job because I needed income to start paying loans. Minimum wage plus a tiny family discount. No benefits because I was part-time, despite working 45 hours a week. Chin Logistics was a regional shipping and warehousing company my grandfather started in 1982. By the time I joined, it was doing about $50 million in annual revenue with 200 employees across 4 facilities. Respectable. Profitable. Not spectacular. Dad ran it with an iron fist and an outdated management style. Mom handled HR and finance with a spreadsheet system from 1997. Kevin was supposed to be bringing in new clients but mostly played golf. Jennifer created marketing materials that looked expensive but generated minimal leads. They were coasting on Grandpa's legacy and long-time client relationships. The industry was changing, e-commerce fulfillment, last-mile delivery, supply chain automation, but Chin Logistics was stuck in the past. I could see it from the warehouse floor. Inefficient routing. Outdated inventory systems. Missed opportunities with emerging e-commerce clients who needed flexible fulfillment partners. But I was just the warehouse guy. Nobody asked for my opinions. I loaded trucks. I organized inventory. I processed shipping orders. I came in early, stayed late, worked weekends. I did my job and kept my mouth shut. And I invested every spare dollar I earned. My roommate from college, Marcus, worked in venture capital. We'd stayed close after graduation and he saw potential in me that my family never did. "You've got good instincts," he told me over beers one night. "That analysis you did of the logistics industry? That was partner-level thinking. You're wasted in that warehouse." "It's a job," I said. "It pays the bills." "Barely. What if I could show you how to make your money work harder?" Marcus introduced me to index fund investing. Taught me about compound interest, dollar cost averaging, long-term growth strategies. I started putting $500 a month into diversified investments. It wasn't much, but it was consistent. Then I got lucky. A tiny biotech startup that Marcus's firm passed on. Too risky, too early stage, caught my attention. I read their research papers. Understood their technology. Saw the potential in their approach to targeted cancer therapy. I invested $5,000. It was almost everything I had saved. 18 months later, they announced breakthrough trial results. The stock went from $3 per share to $87 per share. My $5,000 became $145,000. I diversified immediately. Put most of it into stable index funds and bonds. Used $30,000 for calculated risks on emerging tech companies. 2 failed completely. 1 tripled. Another went up 600%. By my 3rd year in the warehouse, I had $890,000 in my portfolio. By year 4, I'd crossed $2.1 million. I kept working at the warehouse. Kept loading trucks. Kept living in my modest apartment. Drove the same beat-up Honda Civic. Wore the same work boots. Nobody knew. Not Marcus, not my roommate, not my family. Especially not my family. Because during year 4, something interesting happened. Chin Logistics hit a rough patch. A major client went bankrupt, owing them $800,000. 2 key accounts switched to competitors with better technology. An expensive warehouse expansion in Ohio failed to attract enough business. Dad needed capital. Fast. The banks were hesitant. The company's debt-to-equity ratio was already high. Cash flow was tight. They'd approve a loan but at punishing interest rates. Dad's attorney suggested bringing in a silent partner. Someone who'd invest capital in exchange for equity but wouldn't interfere with operations. A passive investor. Dad hated the idea of outside ownership but had no choice. He needed $3 million to cover debts, fund operations, and avoid layoffs. His attorney found a private investment firm willing to structure the deal. Redwood Capital Partners would invest $3 million for a 75% equity stake. Dad and the family would retain 25% ownership and complete operational control. It was a terrible deal from a valuation standpoint. Chin Logistics was worth at least $25 million, probably more. Dad was essentially giving away 75% of a $25 million company for $3 million. But he was desperate and Redwood knew it. I watched the family meeting where they discussed it. I wasn't invited, obviously, but I overheard it while restocking supplies near the conference room. "We don't have a choice," Dad said grimly. "It's take the deal or close 2 facilities and lay off 70 people. "Who is this Redwood Capital anyway?" Jennifer asked. "Some private equity firm. The lawyer vetted them. They're legitimate. And more importantly, they're willing to wire the money immediately." "Do we have to tell them anything about operations?" Kevin asked nervously. He just lost the company's 3rd biggest account through sheer incompetence. "No. The contract stipulates silent partnership. They get quarterly financial statements and dividends when profitable, but 0 operational input. We maintain complete control." "When do we sign?" Mom asked. "Friday. The lawyer's drawing up final paperwork." That was Tuesday. On Wednesday morning, I walked into a private wealth management office in downtown Chicago. I'd done extensive research. Found a boutique firm that specialized in anonymous investment structures for high-net-worth clients. "I need to create an investment vehicle," I told the attorney. "Something that can make corporate investments without revealing my identity." "How much are we talking about?" he asked. $3 million. Immediate deployment." He didn't even blink. "We can structure an LLC with layered holdings. Your name never appears on any documentation. The investment flows through corporate entities. Completely legal, completely private." "How fast can you set it up?" "For a client with $3 million liquid? By tomorrow afternoon." "Do it." By Thursday evening, Redwood Capital Partners LLC was registered in Delaware with me as the sole beneficial owner through a trust structure so complex it would take forensic accountants weeks to unravel. On Friday morning, Redwood Capital Partners wired $3 million to Chin Logistics in exchange for 75% equity ownership. My family had no idea they'd just sold their company to me. The contract was beautifully simple. I provided capital. They maintained operations. I received quarterly financials and 75% of any distributions or sale proceeds. They needed my approval for any major corporate actions. Mergers, acquisitions, asset sales over $500,000, changes in capital structure. Dad signed the papers with visible relief. The money hit the company account the same day. I kept loading trucks. Over the next year, I watched from the warehouse floor as my family ran their company. They made terrible decisions with newfound confidence. Kevin bought himself a Mercedes with his performance bonus after a quarter where revenue actually declined. Jennifer renovated her office with $40,000 in designer furniture because brand image matters. Mom hired her unqualified friend as assistant HR director at an inflated salary. Dad bought a vacation condo in Florida as a company retreat property that only the family ever used. They were treating the capital injection like free money, not understanding they diluted themselves into minority ownership. I said nothing. I loaded trucks. I watched. I documented everything. The company stabilized but didn't grow. Same old clients, same old problems, same old management thinking. They'd survived the crisis but learned nothing from it. Then last month everything changed. Midwest Freight Solutions, a major regional competitor, approached Dad about a merger. They wanted to combine operations, consolidate facilities, and create a dominant regional logistics player. Their offer: $45 million for Chin Logistics. Dad, Mom, Kevin, and Jennifer would receive executive positions in the merged company with generous compensation packages. The Chin Logistics name would be retained for brand recognition. It was a phenomenal offer. Way above market value. Midwest Freight clearly saw strategic value in our client relationships and facility locations. Dad called a family meeting to discuss it. A family meeting. I was in the warehouse 30 feet away when it started. Through the conference room's glass walls, I could see them all gathered around the table. Dad at the head, Mom to his right, Kevin and Jennifer on the sides. A lawyer I didn't recognize. An accountant. And conspicuously no seat for me. I continued my work, organizing inventory near enough to hear occasional phrases. Incredible opportunity. Secured our legacy. Finally getting recognized. Kevin's voice carried clearly. This is what happens when you have real business leadership. The company's value has never been higher. Jennifer laughed. Remember when we were worried about that silent partner situation? Turns out we didn't need them at all. We turned things around ourselves. I kept scanning barcodes, expressionless. The meeting went on for 2 hours. I could see champagne being opened. Congratulatory handshakes. Dad hugging Mom. Kevin and Jennifer taking selfies. Finally, they started to disperse. As Kevin walked past the warehouse area, he called out to me. "Hey, Tommy. Come here a sec." I walked over. "Yeah. Just wanted to let you know. Big change is coming. Company's being acquired. Don't worry, your job's safe. The new ownership wants to keep the warehouse staff." "That's good," I said neutrally. "Yeah, we made sure to protect our people. That's what family does." He grinned. "This is a $45 million deal. Biggest thing to happen to Chin Logistics in decades. Dad's legacy is secure." "Congratulations," I said. "Thanks. Keep up the good work with those trucks." He walked away, already on his phone, probably texting friends about his windfall. I went back to work. That evening, I received an email from Dad. First one he'd sent me in probably 2 years. "Tommy, as you may have heard, Chin Logistics is being acquired by Midwest Freight Solutions. This is a tremendous opportunity for the company and the family. Your position will be unaffected. We appreciate your hard work." Dad, formal, distant, telling me my job was unaffected, like that was the extent of my concern. No mention of the fact that I'd worked there for 5 years. No acknowledgement of the countless weekends I'd covered shifts when others called out. No recognition that I was family too. I forwarded the email to my attorney. "They're proceeding with a sale," I wrote. "Contract requires my approval for transactions over $500,000. Please inform them." His response came in minutes. "We'll send formal notification first thing tomorrow morning. This should be interesting." The next day was the quarterly business review meeting. These happened 4 times a year, formal presentations of financial performance for the board and stakeholders. I'd never been invited to one. I wasn't management. I wasn't important. But this one was special. The Midwest Freight representatives were attending. Final deal terms were being reviewed. Paperwork was being prepared for signature. I was in the warehouse working my regular shift. Around 10 a.m., I heard raised voices from the conference room. Unusual. These meetings were typically boring affairs. PowerPoint presentations, revenue charts, polite applause. This sounded like panic. 20 minutes later, Dad stormed into the warehouse. His face was red, his expression somewhere between fury and confusion. "Tommy. My office. Now." I set down the box I was holding. "Is something wrong?" "Just come with me." I followed him through the facility. Workers watched us pass. The warehouse guy being summoned by the CO was unusual enough to draw attention. Dad's office was in chaos. Mom was there looking stricken. Kevin paced nervously. Jennifer sat with her head in her hands. The lawyer and accountant both looked uncomfortable. 2 people in expensive suits, presumably from Midwest Freight, sat with carefully neutral expressions. And a woman I'd never seen before holding a leather portfolio. "Sit down," Dad said tersely. I sat. Dad gestured to the woman with the portfolio. "This is Catherine Rodriguez, representing Redwood Capital Partners. Apparently there's a problem with the acquisition." Catherine smiled professionally at me. We'd never met in person. All our communication had been through secure channels and encrypted email, but she knew exactly who I was. "Mr. Chin," she said, addressing Dad, "as I've explained, the operating agreement you signed 5 years ago requires approval from the majority stakeholder for any sale or transfer of company assets exceeding $500,000. Redwood Capital Partners owns 75% of Chin Logistics. Therefore, this proposed acquisition cannot proceed without Redwood's explicit written consent." "This is a formality," Dad said dismissively. "You're a silent partner. You'll approve anything that generates returns. This deal benefits everyone." "That may be true," Catherine replied calmly. "However, the legal requirement stands. Redwood's approval must be obtained before any sale can be finalized." One of the Midwest Freight representatives spoke up. "Our offer is time-sensitive. We need all approvals within 7 business days or we'll pursue other acquisition targets." "Then get them on the phone." Kevin demanded. Call Redwood and get approval. How hard is this? Catherine's smile didn't waver. Redwood prefers to handle such decisions through in-person consultation. The principal stakeholder is actually here today. Everyone looked at her blankly. What do you mean here? Mom asked. I mean present. In this room. The silence was absolute. Dad's face went from red to white. What are you talking about? Catherine looked directly at me. Redwood Capital Partners is a holding company. The beneficial owner and principal decision-maker is Tommy Chen. I watched the information hit them in stages. Confusion first. Dad's brow furrowed. That's impossible. Tommy works in the warehouse. Tommy Chen is the sole owner of Redwood Capital Partners. Catherine continued professionally. He invested $3 million 5 years ago in exchange for 75% equity in Chen Logistics. He is the majority stakeholder. This acquisition requires his approval. Jennifer laughed. It was a nervous, disbelieving sound. This is a joke. Tommy doesn't have $3 million. He lives in a studio apartment. He drives a 15-year-old Honda. Mr. Chen's personal financial situation is his own business, Catherine said. But I can confirm his ownership is fully documented and legally unassailable. Kevin stood up abruptly. This is insane. There's no way Tommy has been the silent partner this whole time. He loads trucks. And owns 75% of the company you're trying to sell, Catherine added calmly. The accountant, who'd been frantically typing on his laptop, looked up with a pale face. Mr. Chen, I've pulled the original partnership agreement. The ownership structure it's accurate. Redwood Capital Partners holds 75% equity. And the Delaware corporate records show. He swallowed. They show Thomas Chen as the beneficial owner through a trust structure. Dad turned to me slowly. For the first time in 5 years, maybe in my entire life, he really looked at me. Not through me, not past me, but at me. Tommy, he said slowly. Is this true? I met his eyes. Yes. You own 75% of this company? Yes. For 5 years? Yes. You've been working in the warehouse while owning most of the company? Yes. Mom's voice was barely a whisper. How? Where did you get $3 million? I invested wisely. Made good decisions. Took calculated risks. The money came from various successful investments over several years. Kevin was shaking his head. No. No way. You went to state school. You work minimum wage. You're not capable of. Of what? I asked quietly. Of being smarter than you assumed? Of having skills you never bothered to notice? Of succeeding while you dismissed me as irrelevant? Why didn't you tell us? Jennifer demanded. Why would I? You never asked about my life. Never showed interest in what I was doing. You assumed I was a failure because I didn't follow your path. You were content to let me stay in the warehouse while you played executive in a company I mostly owned. Dad sank into his chair. All these years you treated me like I was worthless, I said, my voice still calm. Do you know what you said at my graduation? Jennifer said my degree was from community college with delusions of grandeur. Kevin called me the family disappointment. Your dad told me I wasn't cut out for management. Mom suggested the warehouse because not everyone is leadership material. We didn't mean, Mom started. You meant every word. And you've spent 5 years proving it. You've run this company into the ground while I bailed you out with my money. You've made terrible decisions, wasted resources, hired unqualified friends, bought luxury items with company funds, and congratulated yourselves on surviving a crisis you never understood you'd already lost control of. The Midwest freight representatives were watching with visible discomfort. One cleared his throat. Perhaps we should give the family privacy to discuss this? No, I said. You should stay. You need to understand the situation too. I turned to Catherine. What happens to their deal if I refuse approval? The acquisition cannot proceed. Midwest Freight withdraws their offer. Chen Logistics continues under current ownership structure, which means you retain 75% equity and they retain 25%. And if I approve? The sale proceeds according to ownership percentages. You receive 75% of the $45 million purchase price. The family receives 25%. I did the math out loud. So I would receive $33.75 million. The family would receive $11.25 million, split among the four of them. Roughly $2.8 million each. That's correct, Catherine confirmed. Kevin's face had gone from red to purple. You're going to take $33 million of our family company's sale? It's not your family company, I said simply. It's my company. You own 25%. I own 75%. That's how equity works. This is theft. Jennifer shouted. You manipulated the situation. You took advantage when we were desperate. I provided capital when you needed it, I corrected. You signed a contract. You agreed to the terms. You just never bothered to investigate who you were signing with. Dad's voice was hollow. Why did you do this? Do what? Invest in a struggling business? Save 200 jobs? Keep the company afloat while you played executive? Or do you mean why did I do it secretly? Why didn't I announce that the son you stuck in the warehouse had become more successful than everyone at this table combined? Yes, Dad said quietly. Why didn't you tell us? I looked at each of them in turn. Because you wouldn't have believed me. Or you would have found a way to take credit. Or you would have resented me even more than you already did. Because the only thing worse than being the family failure is being the family member who succeeded without permission. We never wanted you to fail, Mom said, tears forming. You never wanted me to succeed either, I replied. You wanted me to stay in my lane. Do my job. Not make waves. Be grateful for the scraps you threw me. The room was silent except for the hum of the air conditioning. So what happens now? Dad asked. I looked at Catherine. She knew my decision. We discussed it yesterday after I received Dad's email. I'm approving the sale, I said. Relief flooded their faces. However, I continued, I have conditions. The relief disappeared. What conditions? Kevin asked warily. First, the executive positions offered to you as part of the merger deal? I'm declining those on behalf of family members. You'll receive your 25% of the sale proceeds, but you won't be employed by the merged company. You can't do that. Jennifer protested. I can. I'm the majority stakeholder. And I've reviewed your performance over the past 5 years. Kevin has lost 3 major accounts through incompetence. Jennifer's marketing has generated minimal ROI. You've both treated this company like a personal piggy bank. Midwest Freight deserves better leadership. What about the rest of us? Dad asked. The employees? I'm negotiating employment protections for all non-family staff. Everyone in this warehouse who's worked harder than any of you will keep their jobs with improved benefits. You're punishing us, Mom said. No. I'm holding you accountable. For the first time in your lives, there are consequences for treating people as disposable. I stood up. The sale will proceed. Catherine will handle all negotiations on my behalf. You'll receive your $11.25 million. I suggest you use it wisely because you won't be getting any more from me. Where are you going? Dad asked. Back to work. I have trucks to load. Tommy, wait, Mom started. No. We're done here. You have your answer. The deal goes forward. You get your money. And after this we have nothing more to discuss. I walked to the door. As I opened it, Kevin's voice stopped me. You think you're better than us? I turned back. No, Kevin. I don't think I'm better than you. I know I'm different from you. I know that when I had power over people who dismissed me, I still made the choice that protected their livelihoods. You would have never done the same for me. We're family, Jennifer said desperately. No, I replied quietly. You were my family. I was never yours. There's a difference. I walked out of the office through the facility back to the warehouse floor. My coworkers looked at me curiously. They'd seen me summoned to the executive level. Seen me return. Everything okay? My supervisor asked. Everything's fine, I said. Just some paperwork to sort out. I picked up where I'd left off. Scanning boxes. Loading pallets. Doing my job. An hour later, Dad appeared in the warehouse. He looked 20 years older than he had that morning. Tommy, he said. Can we talk? Really talk? No. Please. I need to understand. I need to explain. There's nothing to explain, Dad. You treated me like I didn't matter for 28 years. The only reason you want to talk now is because you just discovered I have something you need. That's not a relationship. That's a transaction. I was wrong, he said. We were all wrong. About you. About everything. Yes, you were. And now you're going to have to live with that. What happens after the sale closes? You get your money. I get mine. We go our separate ways. You're really done with us? I've been done with you for years, Dad. I just made it official today. He stood there for a long moment, then nodded slowly and walked away. The sale closed 3 weeks later. I received $33.75 million. After taxes, I netted about $23 million. The family received their $11.25 million. They didn't thank me. They didn't apologize. They sent a formal letter through their attorney requesting I sign away my claims to future family assets. I signed it happily. I wanted nothing from them. I quit the warehouse job. Didn't give notice, just stopped showing up. Sent Dad an email. I resign. Effective immediately. Thanks for the 5 years of character development. I used the money to start my own investment fund focused on emerging logistics technology. Invested in companies developing AI-driven supply chain solutions, autonomous delivery systems, sustainable packaging. I'm 31 now. My fund manages $200 million in assets. I employ 15 people and I know all their names, their families, their goals. I bought a house in Lincoln Park. Drive a Tesla. Travel frequently. Date someone wonderful who thinks it's hilarious that I used to load trucks in a company I mostly owned. Last month, Kevin reached out via LinkedIn. Hey man, can we talk? I'm starting a consulting business and could use some investment capital. I deleted the message. Jennifer tried calling last week. Left a voicemail asking if I'd be interested in reconnecting and possibly discussing business opportunities. I didn't call back. Mom sends cards on holidays. Generic ones from the store. She signs them "Love Mom," but they feel obligatory. Dad hasn't contacted me at all. Sometimes I wonder if they ever really understood what happened. If they grasped that the son they stuck in the warehouse became the person who saved their company, made them millionaires and then walked away from them forever. Probably not. But it doesn't matter anymore. I learned everything I needed to know in that warehouse. I learned that hard work matters more than fancy degrees. That quiet competence beats loud arrogance. That the people who dismiss you often don't see their own obsolescence coming. And I learned that family isn't about blood or surnames or who gets invited to quarterly meetings. It's about who sees your value when you have nothing to prove it. My family never saw mine. So I built a new one. And this time I chose people who actually wanted me there. The warehouse was freezing in winter and suffocating in summer, but it taught me more about business, resilience, and human nature than any business school ever could. It taught me that sometimes the person loading the trucks owns the whole damn company. And sometimes that's the sweetest revenge of all.